We going to talk about anything interesting today?
Yep, we are going to learn about Carolyn's new observations and indexing.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. I'm just saying hello in YouTube chat. We are watching there, so if you're watching live on YouTube and have questions, feel free to ask. Let me pop out that chat. Today we have a special show. Carolyn Holzman is going to share her new observations and indexing. So I'm excited because I am actively researching indexing this year. As I did last year, it continues. And so I'm eager to see what other people are seeing. Clint, what do you think about today's topic?
I got some teasers in one of the Skype rooms. Carolyn was dropping teases, and I'm really excited because the single variable stuff, this has a big impact. And she says she gets certain types of pages that we use a lot indexed repeatedly. So we'll see how. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a good news episode. So we're due one of those in terms of indexing. So with that, let me make it so that you can share your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can share. Who can share? Oh, there we go. Now you can share.
Okay, hang on. I will get there.
I was denying you the share.
All right, so I see where we are.
All right, I can see it.
All right. Okay.
So before we get into the topic, let's quickly go through the boilerplate. I know everybody hates this part, so we'll go quickly. So if you can give me the next slide.
Sure.
All right, so what's new on the podcast?
Carolyn's learning how to run two monitors at one time. For this week, I thought I'd explore basically SEO activity and dopamine.
So that feeling you get when you jump up 40 spots?
Yeah, it's sort of like, can SEO, like doing SEO activity, turn into a joy-seeking abyss?
Oh, yeah, it's addictive.
Yeah.
Once you get your first, number, 74 to number 1 on Google, you do that for the first time, you're hooked. You're an SEO addict. I mean, Clint is. I know he gets high on SEO, right, yeah.
Clint? Totally. I mean, there's a kind of a rush to winning. You know what I mean? So once you get good at winning, you want to do it some more and some more and some more, just like anything else.
Yeah, and Lee is a hopeless addict to ranking number 1.
I can quit anytime I want to, sir. I'm not.
I just don't want to.
I just don't want to.
Right.
Well, that's a great topic. I look forward to it. That should be a fun show.
I hope so. All right.
All right. And Clint, you had no show this week. What should people know?
I mean, real life gets in the way sometimes, and I'm actually working on building another agency. So the show, the passion project, kind of gets pushed off to the side. Hopefully we should be back in a week or so. I don't want to make any promises, but we will be back.
All right. Well, we will keep giving updates here, so be sure to check out his show next week. It happens. I miss episodes. I recently missed some for vacations. We do have life to contend with. All right. With that, I'll let you take over, Carolyn.
Okie dokie. So there we go. Episode 146. I did count. Primarily, I just wanted to just start on the fact that, a lot of people have been saying indexation is a real problem, specifically in new content. Because I think it's new for us to distinguish, because before it used to happen so quickly, we never really, or I never really looked at, oh, I just refreshed a page versus I got something brand new in there. And I listed like some reasons, I kind of went through a bunch of our SEO communities to find out, like, what are people, when people post and say, oh, this isn't working, what kind of response do they get? So it's either your site's not authoritative, Google already knows what you're writing about and they've got plenty of it, so they don't want any more. And I love the one that's like, well, I don't have any trouble, you just did it wrong, without providing any guidance. Did I miss anything? Do you guys hear anything else?
I mean, you can add another 100 different whines and cries to that list.
Yeah, I'd say that there's a lot, but it's very common, like in chat discussions or comment threads, that especially in big community groups, that if you have problem indexing, it must be because you're a filthy web spammer. And
Yeah.
I would urge people to throw that type of commentary straight in the garbage. It is a computer system. It is algorithms based. It is not a subjective measurement of quality and value. That is not how search works. And so you got to filter through a lot of criticism to get to truth in this area. And I know that when I was just starting in SEO, I took a lot of negative heat for thinking differently. And, just know that, the criticism is not how search works.
Yeah, I think you also forgot all of the I'll call them the penalty excuses. Your site's been penalized, you have a spammy backlink profile, those kind of things are, fairly common too. You need to disavow all of this crap, or, and then your content will get indexed.
Yeah, we have a comment on YouTube. Jeff Meekin says, your core web vitals isn't good enough for indexing. So
tell me before you say that, because I was drinking water and I almost spit it all over my computer.
Yeah, you hear weird stuff out there, and you just know that it isn't backed by testing. And that's the other thing, is you have to think, do these people have data? Did they conduct a series of tests to come to this conclusion?
Do they apply common sense to what they're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
you got the famous fallback that in case everything else doesn't work, oh, it must be a Google update. So
all of the above. And I kind of read it also as like, you're just doing it wrong. And so this is like from one of my favorite movies. You can't handle the truth, but it really matters how you ask Google for it. So you need to ask them nicely, Danny. And this is primarily what we're told how we're supposed to do it. Go to Search Console, do the URL inspection tool, and request indexing. And so for anybody who doesn't know this, I started a daily testing, index testing back late August, early September, when indexing was slowing down. And what I had to show for it at the end of the year, I published 123 pages, of which 8 got indexed, which was the homepage and 7 inner pages. The last date documented on any page getting indexed on that particular site was middle October. And it was super depressing. So starting the first of the year, I decided I had to cut down on my time on it. So I went to 3 times a week. And then in the middle of February, I got fed up with nothing working. So
Hold on
I,
a second, Carolyn. Let me just ask a couple of questions just to make sure that I understand the first part of that.
yeah,
So from August to December, 123 pages, 8 got indexed. And the last indexing was October 17th, which means that for 2.5 months, you did not have a single new page that you were putting up on the daily basis indexed.
correct,
2.5 months, no love.
correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, it's amazing I made it through. But that has recently changed by revamping the test site. Now the first test was all random alpha. So you can imagine my first thought was, okay, well, you can't index random alpha anymore. So let's go with general article content, not particularly well optimized. And so I moved it to only testing on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And with the setup that I'm going to share, out of 9 test pages, all 9 have been indexed. And I'll tell you how they were indexed, but it's basically 100%. Not to rub it in, but there's a lot of green here. And it's kind of like the sign that it's working, and not just because I say it is, but it's documented in Search Console. So like I said, the first test, random alpha, just showed you a sample there, and each page had 2 keywords on it. One that you could see on the page just by looking at it, and the other one that you could only see, or Google could only see, if it rendered on the back end and put that word together. So you can see on the bottom part, that was just an example of the script, that the only way it would appear on the right is for Google to see it was for it to JavaScript render. And part of the reason that was so important to find out was because a lot of times last year JavaScript rendering was off. So I wanted to find out, one, can they just take any new content in? And if they do take it in, is JavaScript rendering on?
Carolyn, can you explain the 2 different types of crawls that you're talking about here, just so everybody understands?
Sure. The HTML pull, when you see it in the server logs, a bot comes through and it pulls the URL of the page, and then it pulls pieces of the page. And then once it gets back, and I'm going to say on the other side of the wall that we don't see, there are processes that happen so that Google, you don't see my air bunnies, but I'm air bunnying, reads your content and performs all the script instructions that you provide to it. And so you can have a crawl that just pulls your HTML and doesn't do anything, doesn't pull anything else, or you can have a full rendering crawl. And you can see that where it will pull in the pieces. Like if you had an image on there or other types of media, you'll see that it goes and it pulls. And all the scripts, if you're doing WordPress, it pulls all of those. Did that cover it?
Yeah, and I'd like to add that all of this information is actually backed up by Google. They did a Google I/O presentation, I believe, in 2019, where they talked about the 2 types of rendering that they do when Googlebot visits a website. And they talked about it as a quick, simple pass where they get the HTML and process it quickly. And then a second pass where they come back later and they do a really in-depth rendering of the page, and then they re-index based on that rendered content. And so everything that Carolyn just said was totally corroborated by that Google I/O presentation.
Cool. So this next slide is how the The second testing site was set up. This is the one from mid-February. And these were real articles. So I put an example, and no, this is not something that's on the site, so don't try and search for it. But wasn't trying to rank for anything, and put in one keyword, fake keyword, random alpha, and then did another one again in a similar way, but wrapped in the JavaScript so that I could answer the same questions, even though the site was formatted in a different way. So what was different? So primarily, the first one, it was a straight HTML site, but I did everything the way that Google tells you to do and request indexing through Search Console. You may also note that I sent low-level traffic to the site. And so in the new site, I set it up. It was a WordPress installation, set it up, analytics, Search Console, did the sitemap, robots text, and then I connected it to the Google indexing API, being indexed now. And again, continue to send low-level traffic. But I did not once, not never, not ever request indexing via Search Console. Don't do that. So then I decided, okay, if I'm getting 100% indexation by not going through Search Console, how do I know it's because, you know, what can I attribute it to? How can I narrow it down? So these colors represent 3 additional new domains and site setups. Now, the first one was real content, a high level of optimization, sent low level traffic, and it was submitted via Search Console. The homepage indexed, but no inner pages. The second site was real content, no real optimization, low level traffic, and only using the Google indexing API and Index Now. And every page got indexed within 48 hours of getting crawled. And now I use Search Console to verify. So once a page is published, I do ask about the new URL, and Search Console confirms a bot went there, it crawled it, and it's on the Google index. Now it can't be found in the primary index. That's what takes about 48 hours. And just because it happened once and then happened a second time, I felt I needed a third one just to verify again. And the same thing continues to happen. So it's repeatable results. Any questions?
Well, first of all, it's got me thinking. So in my head, like I try to divvy it up into scenarios, like Google's indexing apparatus is actually separate and independent from like Search Console. So technically one or the other could be on or offline. Could this be, you know, an example of one indexation path being closed or diminished while another indexation path is open and fine?
Well, you know, I tried this before in the fall, going with the Google indexing API. And at the time, because there was a lot of discussion on 2 requirements that had to be present if you were going through the API, was something that implied an immediate job opening or a like a live event. It was sort of like the way to, like in Disney, you get the fast pass.
The requirement for job posting schema or a broadcast event schema.
Right. That's how you had to tell them that that's what it was. And when I was running some test pages that way, they would get indexed and then they would get kicked out. Starting in February, when I was testing this way, I did not experience that same result. It changed.
And the other distinction I like to point out is that there's often a difference in behavior between new content pages and updated content pages. So for example, I recently did index requests for updates to already indexed pages, and I put in new test keywords the exact same way you described with the JavaScript and the simple keywords. And I did get that update request to go through. So do you think your scenario might vary based upon whether or not it's new content versus page updates?
Well, I'm only talking about new content because no one really reported problems getting refresh crawls. And I've seen that because also I'm going through server logs every day. And I see lots of refresh crawls to sites that don't even have any content, but they were, expired domains. And you see like a memory of where something used to be, and they come and look for it constantly. And so I didn't really see any issues with refresh crawls. And sometimes you see refresh full render crawls. But yeah, all of this is strictly when you have new content that is not indexed. Once these pages are in there, and I do make some, like you, change some keywords just to go like, hey, you come back, and I use Search Console for that, but I don't do it for new content.
Yeah, last year when I was doing a lot more testing, I bought 10 gibberish domains to do the testing on. I figured get something that, had no reputation. So I got a, JLQRSTVWWJX.com type of thing. And I thought I was safe with it, but it turns out it was a telco website in China before I bought it. And the indexation on that thing was off the chart compared to the other test domains that I had that were truly new domains. Could that be at play here?
Not for these. I did check in the Wayback Machine. So yeah, none of these showed any history. And I would actually say when I look in the server logs, I don't see bots that come with a memory to these sites, which I do 100% of the time when I've got an expired domain.
So we have a question here for you from YouTube from Stefan. He says, so if I understand correctly, you are using the indexing API for pages with no job posting or broadcast event and still getting the pages to stay indexed?
Correct. And every time, like I recently went back to that first test setup, made a new page, and continued to submit it through Search Console. Just to kind of go like, is it still that way? Or was it a timing thing? Did I stumble on something and now everything is different? But I'm still seeing the discovered not crawled in the Search Console for that first version of the test site.
Yeah. I was earlier when I saw your slides before the show, I was feeling conflicted because like I've had that recent experience of submitting in Search Console and getting page updates to happen. But the more I think about it after hearing your explanation, the more I think it really could be a different scenario, a different application path, because I wasn't doing new pages. And so I think you might be onto something here that the new page treatment you get from Google is probably a different path with different criteria than updating an already established page. And it's one of those areas in SEO where we don't know a lot. We need more people to really kind of research these behaviors. So, Clint, are there any studies along this line that you know of?
No, Carolyn's doing most of it. I mean, James and I over at SIA are tinkering around with some of the things, and we've found new content versus old content submitted via Search Console is, like Carolyn said, it's just not indexing. Either we'll get the discovered but not indexed message, or we won't get anything, or we'll get it's crawled and indexed, but it's not really in the index, or it's indexed, but it's not ranking when we run into that stuff. So the index and the indexing API, like Carolyn said, it did work for all the posts. Then they turned on that job posting and broadcast schema, and it makes sense that they turn it off. What I think this is kind of a pattern in relation to what you and Lee were talking about, where the Google index is just at this point is just becoming untenable, and they're dealing with having too much data and they don't know how to sort it. And it seems to me that if they leverage the API versus Search Console, they can say, because only site owners, you have to be a site owner. You can't be a delegated owner in Search Console. You have to be a site owner in Search Console to submit via the API for that domain. They're somehow limiting how many URLs people are submitting now and slowing it down, which makes sense how Carolyn's use of it for a brand new site that she is the site owner is now getting indexed and ranked.
Yeah, and Search Console had a cap on how many you could request for a website, and early on it was 100. Yeah, and then it was 50, and then is it still 50?
It's 50 per account, and then you can essentially have your website in 50 accounts and go drop X number, whatever the math works out to be there. Leaves the math genius in URL.
The other thing is to set up the API, you have to have billing set up on the account. So you actually have to be a real,
person,
work around.
Verified by credit card.
Yes.
And it's only 200 URLs a day.
Right.
Regardless of how many domains you own, you can only send 200 URLs through that API a day.
So, Carolyn, I had a thought while staring at these slides and thinking about your historical testing. Have you considered putting the indexing API on your historical testing site where you've only submitted by Search Console and see if you can get the 100+ pages indexed?
It sounds good, but it was a HTML site, so it would be a big conversion over to, because how I get it hooked up is I do it through WordPress and using the Rank Math plugin.
You can use SEO tools for Excel. There's a connector inside of that, and then all you do is hook you connect your API key inside of the connector file. There's a post inside of the form that shows how to do it. It's stupid easy once you know how to do it, and then you can actually switch accounts inside of that too. So you don't have to have anything installed on your website. You just download your get a screaming frog run of your URLs and throw it in the spreadsheet, and then do a little formula thing and push go, and it sends everything for you.
Ooh, nice. Okay. Can I connect with you on that later?
Yeah, I'll show you how.
Okay.
So
Cool.
we have a couple more questions here. First one is, how do you send low-level traffic? Micro workers, paid ads, or something else?
It's something else. I use a service that you kind of say, where do you want to start and where do you want your traffic from? But I don't do micro workers, and I go through a service so I don't have to manage proxies and stuff like that.
And you don't do a ton, do you? You're just doing a small
Oh,
trickle amount.
a tiny amount. Yeah.
So
Um,
on the order of tens or on the order of hundreds? What's the scale?
Oh, I would say anywhere from 7 to 31 a day.
So a tiny amount of traffic.
Yes. I find sometimes less is more because I want to I want to stay under whatever possible tripwire there might be.
Well, you don't want to become a hot trend, because when the trend stops, there's probably a cost to that too.
Well, believe me, as you can see, this kind of content is not going to create a trend.
Yeah, but a perceived one on Google's part.
Yes, true.
The next question, is there any reason to suspect, even an outside chance, that Index Now had something to do with this observation?
Totally.
I have different sites that are, even though I use Rank Math, you can set one or the other or both. And so I've done it, one with Index Now by itself and one with the Google API by itself. And I get the same result.
Now, does Google have a working Index Now implementation, or is that just for Bing only?
I heard they were working on it. Does anybody know?
It's not really an implementation. They're just going to tie. They were thinking about or debating about tying into it like Yandex does. But I doubt they're ever going to say whether they officially say that whether they're going to use it or not.
So that would be interesting, is to submit a test page with only Index Now and see if it indexes in Google.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Oh, one piece before I forget, you know, those fake keywords, we always test in Google for them. So I started testing in going to Bing and seeing if I could find that. Let's see. Sorry about that. And they are indexing in Bing as well, both for the on-page keyword and the JavaScript keyword. But the JavaScript in Google, they both test live on the same day. On Bing, like it might take Bing another 2 to 3 days to process the JavaScript.
And this is kind of a new development, because I know a year to 2 years ago, you couldn't get the rendered text to show up in Bing. So it looks like Bing is making advancements too.
I'm more and more surprised by Bing all the time, in a pleasant way, not an unpleasant way. But yeah. So just in case anybody's wondering, I did yet another test setup to publish Random Alpha. And this was more for my fellow SEO testers. And so I was able to get it indexed. Ta-da! By both words on there. So I think we can use this and continue to do our thing.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, we definitely have been fighting indexation and testing, and a lot of non-testers don't understand why, because it's so easy to get a skyscraper blog post to index. But an SEO test page is usually the opposite of that. It's kind of like super thin, minimize all your variables because you don't want to spoil the thing you're testing. And so it really ends up being, garbage, barely rankable test pages so that you can isolate the thing that you're testing. And those also happen to be the hardest things to index. So SEO testing in that regard is really tricky. It's really on the edge of the most difficult indexing problem you can have. And so, yeah, having a better process to get success in that is really valuable to looking at the algorithm and figuring out how it works.
So that's
So-
kind of how I do it. And specifically for right now, I mean, who knows? It could change tomorrow, right? But I would steer clear of the indexing through the search console with new content, unless you don't care and you don't mind it dies.
Yeah, and she's not saying don't use it for page updates. I've used it recently for page updates, and it appeared to work fine for me. You have to make the distinction between new content pages versus updating already existing pages.
Right. And like I said in the beginning, I think we're not used to that distinction because we never had to. I mean, in the early days of testing, remember, we would launch a test and get a reading, get everything indexed within 5 minutes or less.
Yep.
And so now with this, somehow the new content having some kind of force field around it in Search Console, I just won't do it. So that's what I found, guys.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's great news.
Another plugin that you mentioned, Rank Math there, SEO Press Pro also has both of these indexing options now
Oh, cool.
as well.
I think it's cool that all to find this very cool and useful information for those that are content producers or testers, that all Carolyn had to do was 6 months of daily frustration. That's, a lot of times people really like to see, how do you find these things in testing and so forth, and it takes work. So I want to applaud the many months of toiling that it took to find this.
Yeah, it's a mountain of effort to do quality SEO testing, and it's not, just put a page up and, woohoo, bold tags work. Testing hasn't been like that for years now, and a lot of that style of testing has already been done to death. And what's been left over is all the things that are too hard and painful to test. So when a tester takes that on and is doing daily updates to the testing and repeating the testing, it's almost like a part-time job. It's a huge amount of time to be able to learn something new about Google. And that's why there are so few testers. Most SEOs, they call themselves testers, but when you really get down to it, are they actually testing? And so, yeah, it's a very impressive feat.
Well, can I share with you the latest thing that's probably gonna like totally blow your minds?
Please.
Okay. This happened twice. That's why I didn't make the slides. But this was last Friday and yesterday. And in this WordPress setup, I'm using a Googlebot plugin that lets you know the latest visit to the page by Googlebot. So I had a situation where the new test page launched. The plugin registered a Google visit. I went to Search Console and said, tell me what you know about this URL of the new page. Not only did Google say it was indexed, it said the bot had come, and it told me what bot and when, and the type of bot and the time matched the plugin exactly. I spent close to 4 hours yesterday scouring through the server logs, and I could not find a single record of that time to that site to that page. I'm just going to say that I have never experienced, and went back and to troubleshoot and go like, okay, did I pull the right log? Yes. Did I pull the right day? Yes. What's the time on the server? The server time in this particular one is set to Greenwich Mean Time, and so there's always the possibility that I was wrong on the time. So I went to the site on a page that I knew wasn't there, so that I could use the server log to confirm the exact time differential between my time and the server time. So it still didn't, that they matched exactly. So I'm still sitting here going, how is that possible? And the page from Friday that also exhibited that same behavior is indexed. I can find it by its keyword, but I cannot find when Googlebot came.
Yeah, that sounds like there's an incarnation of Googlebot that doesn't disclose that it's Googlebot.
Ted, there's another possibility, because Carol and I were digging into this because I had the 100 different questions. So the times match up and everything matches up perfectly, but there is no visits by anyone or anything at those 2 times. The thing that we think is a possibility is the Google API submission. It submits the full content via the API, so the bot doesn't have to come. It's fed the data via the API.
That's technically possible, but that would be very, very inefficient engineering and probably problematic because of all of the asynchronous resources that the page needs for rendering. I mean, it's possible, but I think it's unlikely. So I'd want to see more evidence of that happening somehow.
Yeah, we
Working
couldn't
on it.
find anything else in the logs though that matched up to the timing. There's a ghost town around the 2 times that appear in the plugin and in Search Console. So
now, I do know that Google has a process of delaying things that appear like in cache, because you can actually weaponize the Google cache. It's a component of a certain category of negative SEO attack, is to know when Googlebot is crawling a site. And if you can look at the cache dates for when they change, then you know that Googlebot's on the site. To remedy that, Google had to change, they had to put delay in so that by the time you see the updated dates, Googlebot's already done. So I know that there are some time delay games going on in Google's end for specifically the cache dates.
The weird thing was on that, Ted, is that yesterday's log, and I looked also in today's to go back to see, like, did they show up later on? And I can't find the word that's unique in the URL. It's not a fake keyword. It's a real word, but it's unique in that I can use that just to find out how many times was this page crawled or how many times was it visited and that kind of thing. And couldn't see this. Now, one other thing is, you remember Friday, it was like super, the weather tools were like, the sky is falling. And I know some people have been reporting, a possible update and things like that. Not that they know what that is, but
Yeah, the past 5-6 days, I've seen weird behavior too. I have a newish website, and it had some press releases. So there's the page I'm trying to rank, and then there's the press about that page. And what I was seeing in the index is both the page and the press about the page would vanish. And then 24 hours later, they'd come back and they'd start ranking again. And I'd be like, woohoo, they're back. I'm in the game. And then a day or two later, the page and the press about the page would vanish. And so I'm kind of leaning towards, Google might have been making changes and doing rollbacks and then letting it change again and going, no, that's not quite right, and then doing a rollback. So yeah, I think that update activity, that could be something too. What do you think, Lee?
The weirdness, just because I watched with you your site come and go, and thought, well, that's just normal activity. When you give it some links and it's new, it'll disappear and reappear at a higher blah blah blah. But you were having Yahoo News things disappear. That's fairly authoritative site. And so given that there's some weirdness around, and I've seen from other people who are working on some projects, pages bouncing in and out of the index and weird things going on. So that's there. But for Carolyn's specific situation, not having Googlebot appear anywhere in the log at the time that they say that they came, there's like nothing there in the log. It's not even that they're visiting as a different user agent from a different IP. There's nothing there.
So they're saying that they went and it didn't show up. What that could be is that they had an earlier visit in cache and their cache copy didn't expire. So they used their cache copy again.
For a new page? That's the thing. It's Carolyn's is all new pages, and the it's all new pages.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of to have absolutely nothing in the log at the time that Google says they visited is that they already had a copy somehow.
Right.
And it wasn't set to expire.
Ooh, that is intriguing. Okay. I'll work on that.
I mean, other that or their system flat out lied. Like it said it went there and didn't at all.
Yeah, but the page is indexed.
Yeah, so it's indexed. So somehow they got a copy. So they had a copy to work with. They just didn't fetch it from the server at the time they said they did.
Now, one thing I have done is I've messaged the developers of that plugin, because I want to find out how did they know a bot came. They're not looking at my search console. So there might be something that since those two lined up, I want to know like where they're doing that. So work keeps going on, right?
Yep. We have a couple more questions here. Ted mentioned that getting skyscraper content indexed isn't a problem, but indexing test pages is. Do we know where Google differentiates between low quality and high quality? Yeah, we largely do. It tends to be about the relevance of the page, and the things you need to do to kind of craft that involve factor diversity around your keywords and entities, and entity diversity and keyword density. Those are kind of the components of getting that topical relevance that helps you. And it's really easy to do that on a skyscraper article, and it typically spoils your SEO test if you do it on an SEO test page. And so, that's why one is easy and the other is really hard. When you take away the standard playbook for SEO from your testing, it gets really hard. Let's see, the next one. What if you send an updated sitemap with new pages into the sitemap and resubmit the sitemap with new URLs in it? I've always found that sitemaps are really great if you want to be indexed in 2 to 6 weeks. They're very reliable. It's slowly getting to the finish line. But if you're in a hurry, they are very frustrating. What do you think, Clint?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of the structural thing you want there for when the bots do come. They're sort of expecting that to be in your robots.txt, but don't depend on it unless you're just like, I'm going to build this site and then I'll come back to it in 3 to 6 months. And by then, they'll eventually crawl everything in the sitemap.
Yeah, the other thing is I've tested a bunch of different things with sitemaps because you can have multiple. So I've tested, building a single sitemap for a single page. Once you submit it, Google will crawl it. You'll see that, hey, the URL has been discovered, but it has no impact on indexing. It indexes when it indexes, just like everything else. So.
And there's a question for which plugin is that? Can we repeat the plugins we've suggested? I know that there's the Rank Math one by Google. What was the other one? SEO Press?
Yeah, SEO Press Pro, but he's probably asking about the bot.
Oh, it's a simple Google bot. It's in the WordPress repository.
Yeah, simple Googlebot visits, cool little plugin.
Excellent. So with that, we are all out of questions. So I think we will call the show here. I want to thank everyone and to remember to check back for SEO this week, next week. Maybe it'll be back. If not, just come back here and we'll give you an update on that. And don't forget Carolyn's podcast, Confessions of an SEO. You can search for it by name in Google, and it's on every single podcast platform out there. So you can use the platform of your choice to check out that content. And I'm looking forward to that new episode that you're doing. Is SEO an addictive drug? Because I happen to think it is. So that should be a fun one. Thank you again, Carolyn. I'll give you the last word.
Oh, no, I just really appreciate your questions and everything. It just makes testing better when we can make sure we're seeing what we think we're seeing. I sure appreciate the feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much. See you, everyone.